Hello and welcome. You are watching News 9 Live. I'm Krishna Kumar and we are bringing you this special on the upcoming budget 2024. Bear in mind, which we now know is going to be announced on the 23rd of July. What can the budget do to boost job creation in this country and the country's rural economy? That's what we're going to be discussing on this show. We here at News 9 Live have kicked off our pre-budget programming, and in this special series that we're calling Budget 2024, Blueprint for the Big Leap, we today dedicate this edition to the country's rural economy and job creation. In a recent report from the National Sample Survey Office, or NSSO, the unemployment rate for those aged 15 and above in urban areas saw a slight decline, dropping to 6.7% in the January to March period. The unemployment rate, which measures the percentage of unemployed individuals within the labor force, was 6.8% in the March quarter of last year, that is financial year 2023. Now, it has remained relatively stable as the budget is due for presentation. What measures can the new budget introduce to further reduce the urban unemployment rate? What specific policies should the government focus on to drive more significant reductions in joblessness in the country? How can the budget address the needs of India's labor force? Let's discuss that, and to do that, joining us on this show, we have Mr. Prabir Jha, distinguished HR strategist, founder and CEO, Prabir Jha People Advisory, joining us. Thank you, Prabir, for taking time out to be with us. We also have Ms. Rituparna Chakraborty, independent director, also joining us. Thank you, Rituparna, for taking time out to be with us on this show. I'm going to begin by asking Prabir a very simple question. So many thoughts on job creation in the country, coming at a time when there's so many fears about job losses, starting from technology taking away jobs to the economy taking away jobs. But tell us, what would you, from your perspective, expect from the upcoming budget when it comes to creating jobs in this country?
So, Krishna, thank you for having me on your show. Always a pleasure. And, just a little caveat. We look at job creations as quick fixes. I fundamentally believe the issue is of disguised unemployment and underemployment. The obsession with high degrees and the mismatch with employable skills is really the core problem. I don't think we've done a good job of that. But having said that, and we can get into more details of this, I personally think that the incentive should be to actually create and encourage more enterprise, all kinds of capex investments, starting from MSME, including possible tax ops for them, as also large organized employers. The entire thing is really about how does profitability not find reduction in headcount as the silver bullet, as has often been the case. So it needs a very strategic reset, and I think policy support which helps different categories of employers seek to offer employment, from both entrepreneurship to MSME to mid-size, urban, rural. And I personally think that, with the right kind of financial incentives and breaks, we'll possibly get started. The only thing that unfortunately gets a lot of attention, especially in certain states, is obsession with guaranteed job security and government employment. I don't think that is really the kind of job creation solution that the government really has an appetite for, because there are fiscal imbalances that will get created. So I think imaginative policy support to create more employment of different kinds, and real big incentive to upgrade the quality of skills. I think there's a big skill mismatch, and I think that is what we need to address, whether it's the rural or the urban segment.
Okay, Rituparna, I want to focus on the rate of urban unemployment and what can be done from a policy level to fix that.
Five things, and these five things honestly have not changed maybe for the last decade or so. Thanks for having me first and foremost on the show. And that's essentially is that India is a country which essentially needs to focus clearly on providing incentives for non-farm jobs. In this case, in India, I think particularly the topic of revitalizing employment and larger formal employment in manufacturing has probably been reiterated over and over again. And I'm going to repeat that. I know that there is some good work that has been done in order to kind of encourage more manufacturing or revitalize manufacturing in India, but less is said than done, I guess. So I guess first, of course, is incentivize non-farm jobs, because given where most of these unemployable and unemployed kids are, or the youth are, which is, of course, across the large part of rural India, the best way to kind of move them away from the non-productive engagement with agriculture would be to kind of in manufacturing. The second, of course, is that I know again this is a topic that we on and off as a jargon talk about, is that we have to create more job magnet cities. So I know the smart cities project got a lot of there was a lot of talk around it, but I don't know how much of that have actualized in the real sense, because finally the cities that exist today in India cannot anymore bear the brunt of the level of migration that's happening. And one can't really do much about it because where the unemployment currently exists, in none of these places, the economic activity is good enough to kind of meet their expectations in terms of wages, to fulfill their basic aspirations, and inadvertently, the few cities become the go-to place for most of these people. So I think in order to avoid this, because we are already some of the cities are facing deep infrastructural challenge in order, which honestly is quite dangerous. I think in the long run, the only way we can change that trend would be to create more cities, which are job magnets.
All right.
Third would be incentivize formal enterprises. I don't think India has enough employers, formal employers, for us to provide the kind of formal jobs or the employment that we're talking and the scale at which that we're talking about. And India has always been a quite hostile towards people, organizations, or who want to scale. Fourth would be skills. Definitely, I couldn't agree with Prabir more. I think we have a situation where we have been, doling out graduates who have so-called knowledge but very little skills, because of which they're underemployed. They suffer from subsistence level of employment. And finally, of course, labor laws. I mean, we've spent like for the last 8 years, I'm hearing about the labor code being actualized, implemented, executed. Well, it hasn't seen the light of the day, and it's a shame because there's a lot of good work that yes, but it should be about around these five things.
Prabir, the question here is job creation. Okay, as far as urban job creation is concerned, the larger solution is to have more cities in this country than the one that we do have. But what about creating jobs in the rural economy? How about measures to boost the rural economy?
So I think, I personally believe there is a huge opportunity at two levels. One is in the food processing industry. I personally believe that the government can actually do a great job if both the federal government and the state governments can join hands more effectively. There are many parts of India where there's a lot of opportunity for rural agri produce, cold storage, and this, farm to harvesting to processing possible exports. And I come from a state called Bihar, and I can tell you that if some were to really think deep about making the agro-based industry, food processing industry robust, there's a huge ecosystem redesign, and that solves a larger macro unemployment problem. The second thing that I believe is very important is there is a lot of opportunity similarly to be looking at MSME. Connected with the point about our big urban centers already kind of stagnating and getting worse. Either you get new cities or you try to create more MSME ecosystem in districts, which could be partly with a rural footprint. There was a policy or there was a thinking of the government, which I personally like, that is each district to have a unique product or service potentially for export. And I think if we do it smartly and do it with some kind of coordinated planning, it will generate and unleash a lot of employment possibilities and better quality. And these things can actually range all the way from maybe in pockets of better quality tourism to better products and better export-oriented goods that we could create. And the more they start creating a flywheel effect, it will also address this entire issue of migration, which is also becoming a big problem, because that also feeds into suppressed wages, therefore disengagement, and there's a lot of political and societal hue and cry about it. So these are two areas, focus on the food processing industries. And second is take the MSME literally to more smaller towns, and give it a certain shape, size, and budgetary support for better quality and better market linkages. And I think we will have a huge opportunity to solve the problem we are discussing.
Rituparna, solving the joblessness in the rural economy also needs some sure-footed moves at a policy level. That's what Prabir is talking about. If you're saying urban unemployment can be countered by the creation of more cities, positioning certain industries in terms of their ability to generate jobs for the rural economy is also very important.
Oh, absolutely. But the biggest problem here is that how labor falls between the purview of the central government and the different states. That itself has always been the reason behind, if there is a unified vision around job creation, not really getting translated down. So I do understand the role of the central government, and I do understand where states become relevant. But I think there is one aspect where the government can actually weigh in, especially the central government can weigh in, and that can help make India inclusive, which means this so-called divide that we currently have between urban and rural can be bridged. And in my mind, that route would be through leveraging technology. We have seen the explosion that currently that technology has unleashed in India today. I mean, there is really no lives in India which has not been impacted by a smartphone or access to good quality internet, even rural India for that matter. So I personally believe that that's one area where government can essentially weigh in. And how? Just like in the financial world within India, we have created an amazing public infrastructure called UPI. Why are we not focusing on creating a similar platform which cuts across geographies and which helps actually get matching done much better? For example, the fact that there are so many jobs which are available sometimes do not reach the relevant people with the relevant skills across the country are on account of the fact that there is really no unified platform, and cost of acquisition, cost of finding the right person for the right job, even for the candidates to find the right, is so high, so humongous. So I honestly believe that to make India more inclusive around jobs, government could use blockchain, government could use artificial intelligence, and the plethora of jargons that we are surrounded with around internet. Create that infrastructure, make it a free resource which any employer, any candidate can have access to, and you will see how many lives get impacted and improved on account of this. So I think the first thing is that we have to stop referring this huge thing about rural urban. I know it's not something which will go away, but at least in the realm of jobs and employment, it can if technology is leveraged to its potential. Of course, everything else that Praveen mentioned, I mean, absolutely bang on. I don't want to spend time reiterating and focusing. You've seen how in smaller towns may not have reached yet the hinterland. The e-commerce, the food tech companies, I mean, they've gone into smaller towns, and how much impact they have created on the back of technology. The fact that Swiggy's and Zomato's today are available in smallest villages and smaller towns itself is testimony that what technology can do and the amount of jobs they're able to create in some of these places. So we need to think about how technology can actually be a game changer when we are talking about making India more inclusive around employment.
Prabir, I'm going to ask you a simple question. When it comes to stimulating the economy, there is very limited fiscal space that's available. At the end of the day, it looks like what is needed right now is a long-term economic vision to create jobs and keep creating jobs going forward into the future. How does one do that? By balancing, the fiscal responsibility alongside with it.
Absolutely brilliantly put. There are no silver bullets for the government, right? You've got to manage fiscal prudence, and yet you have to solve a very, very major problem, which is unemployment, or growing unemployment. 2 points I want to share, Krishna, with you. One is, you have to set a directional message about industries, about sponsorship and support for what are basically more manpower requiring industries. I'll just give you a couple of examples. For example, tourism. Tourism has a huge cascade implication. Now, are we really serious about building world-class tourism? I honestly think Indian tourism has huge potential, but it sucks at the moment. It is pathetic at the moment, right? The government has to be imaginative and has to tie all the different ends up. I think a huge message can be sent there. Jewelry, textile, these are huge areas. There's huge global competition, but these are mass employment despite every possible technology intrusion happening. So the government must also pick its battles. That's the first part. Second is we are talking about huge infrastructure expansion. But I can tell you there's a huge crisis of skills, right? Where are the masons or the construction people to undergo the kind of infrastructure expansion that the government is talking about, or a new capital that Andhra wants, right? These can generate huge employment. And therefore, my other point that I want to share is that the government must take a very, very strong directional review of how it wants to marry HRD and skill development. They are two different ministries, unfortunately. But I personally believe, and I've been screaming from the rooftops, although the new national education policy actually is a step forward, but it has to come to life. Why does everyone have to go to become a graduate and a postgraduate? I think this obsession with higher education, read better quality jobs, is a misnomer. What we need are skills, employable skills. And I think the vocational education, the German model, I think is both societally, governmentally, and individually the right way to go. And if there is a way in which the government and this budget can send directional signal about upgrading the quality of skill transference, the quality of ITIs, upgrading the curriculum, making sure that, you got to actually focus on the lower end of the education, higher education value chain rather than the higher end of the value chain. We have done, in my view, a wasted effort of too many private universities, creating more and more graduates and postgraduates, whereas what India needs today is really pair of hands and a mind which is actually able to leverage that. So I think if the budget also is able to look at HRD and the skill agenda and marry it with the larger agenda of MSME and large-scale enterprise, I think that will be the right signal for this budget to create, and we'll have to see what comes out of it.
Okay. Rituparna, I'm going to ask you a very simple question. At the end of the day, the budget is a statement of accounts. Off late, we've seen the fact that, now some of the biggest announcements are not made in the budget. But what can be done in terms of allocations per se when it comes to, boosting the rural economy and creating jobs in both rural and urban sectors?
Glad that you're raising this, and especially when we're discussing employment and jobs. Because honestly, it's not that we need more money to solve this problem. What we need is this clear intent and signaling. And if one can do that through the budget, so be it. But I think what essentially one is looking for is that reimagination of how we're going to solve the problem. India's education system clearly has failed its youth, and it needs a complete relook, but it's going to take a lot of courage, because there are a lot of deep-rooted interests involved around the way the current education system operates. It's a huge money-making engine. It's proliferated over the last few years in the name of promising great jobs, great future, but it's really not yielding any results whatsoever. So even when youth come out of some of these so-called premier schools or colleges, they still have to undergo a period of relearning, unlearning, or training, whatever you might call it, before they actually become productive at workplaces. So I think somewhere a bold reimagination of the entire education system is an absolute need of DR. Yes, NEP is a great step forward, but it's a mere guideline. It's not something which is a mandate. It's not a regulation. So somewhere we have to take some courageous calls around this area. Apprenticeship, I've been talking about it, is probably one excellent way by which industry can join hands together to kind of make this particular initiative possible. I've been talking about technology and how digital can change our lives. Again, I think if you can marry digital learning and digital education or seeking getting it accredited with so-called degrees because degrees seem to have a social signaling value, along with apprenticeship, and again, we'll put more weight behind it, create more incentives for organizations to opt for it. I think it's going to go a long way in terms of solving the problem that is really staring at us. There's another area I know we have not really spoken about much. I think you've been hearing about how India is emerging as a significant player around the GCCs, and India can actually become the global center of excellence for every possible country, every possible corporate out there.
Right.
But again, a government weigh in on this aspect, and it can be any state in this country. And just like we have we have started a ranking among states in terms of ease of doing business. A specific mandate and a report, and someone out there would like to pick up this mandate in terms of the attractiveness of different states from a GCC perspective would be great. That itself potentially can create some large number of jobs across the country.
Right.
So I think some of these things maybe, yeah.
Global capability centers seems to be the new buzzword when it comes to creating more employment in this country. And Rituparna talking about it as well. Rituparna, I'm afraid we've completely run out of time over here on the show. Great to have you, on the show, and of course, Mr. Prabir Jha as well. Thank you both of you for taking time out to be with us here. And with that, we wrap things up. Thank you so much for watching. Our pre-budget programming will continue all the way up to the budget on the 23rd of July. For now, this is Krishna Kumar signing off.